Well, hello everyone, my name is Zwiggo and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to play Pokemon Insurgence, one of the best fan games ever made. It's already a pretty old fan game, but it still holds up to this day with its own Mega Evolutions and Delta Species Pokemon, which are basically just regional variants. This game also has its own region and unique storyline, so nothing you've ever seen before. And before you start your game, you get the option to pick between multiple difficulty options. You could do a Hardcore Nuzlocke, a Wonderlock, randomize your game, or even do a solo run which allows you to only use one Pokemon. But what we are going to be using today is the Egg Challenge. So what happens here is your entire PC will be filled with eggs except for your last two boxes. And once you capture a Pokemon, you can't use it, but you can swap it out with an egg from your PC. And once that egg hatches, you get a random Pokemon. And these random Pokemon are what we are going to use to build our teams. And then we're going to Hardcore Nuzlocke this entire game. The Hardcore Nuzlocke rules will be on the screen right now, and the level caps are actually implemented in the game itself, just like in Pokemon Radical Red. Before we kick off the video, let's try to smash 8,000 likes as well, because this took me quite a long time to make, as it's not an easy game, and I definitely whited out a couple of times. While you're down there, also don't forget to subscribe, and with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into the Pokemon Insurgence Egglocke. We start off the game by seeing some flying Pelipper's and Wingulls, and once they land down, we get to pick our own name. Also, the first 5 minutes of this video will be recorded wrong, because there is a little part of the bottom of the screen that's being cut off. Don't worry though, after about 3 minutes it will be fixed. We then get ourselves some purple hair. I guess we got that by walking in purple rain. And then our journey starts. We get put into the Darkrai cultist's base, and Gengar is tormenting us with nightmares while we're sleeping. Luckily for us though, we have a companion named Mew who scares it off and lets us transform into Darkrai cultists after finding their DNA. This means that we can now unlock closed doors and explore this entire base to our free will. As we finally reach the main gathering room, we see that the leader of this cult has summoned Darkrai because she wants to take over the world with him. But just as they're about to capture it with a net, Darkrai manages to escape. Of course, she isn't too happy about that, but this is a perfect opportunity for us to escape to the nearest town. Here we meet a shy kid named Damian, who is going to be our rival in this game. And together with him, we step into the professor's lab where we see Rukra, a very shady character that we don't know much about yet. But he delivered starter Pokemon to the professor, so let's pick ourselves a Ninja Turtle, Squirtle. As you can see, once I pick this Squirtle, it immediately goes to my box where I have to swap it out for an egg. I decided to just pick a random one, and it turns into a Delta Venipede, a rock fire type that looks like it came straight out of hell, hence the name Hellspawn, I guess. With Hellspawn, we easily managed to overpower our rival's Delta Bulbasaur with a couple of Smogs, since it is Psychic Fairy type. And once we are done there, we capture a Caterpie, and as you can see, it turns into an egg token that's unusable. The amount of detail in this game is absolutely amazing. Once I swap it out for an egg, I get myself a Delta Darumaka, a Ghost Dark type, which means he only has one weakness, Fairy. He's kind of a glass cannon, but he will definitely help us a lot throughout our journey. Next up on our journey was a cave where we found two cultists of the Groudon and Kyogre cults that were talking about executing their plan to take out the first Augur, who's seen as the protector of this region. Once we overhear their plan, we have to go back to the town to report it to the authorities. But first, we get a Tauros from an egg. Once we arrive into town, however, the Abyssal Cult is already planning their attack on the Augur, which is the guy with the yellow hair. So with our newly acquired Pokemon, we stop them, we then get the Augur's blessing to go and explore the region, and we're off. Traveling by foot and capturing lots of Pokemon who we can turn into eggs, as we get a Vanillite, an Akshu, and a Goldeen. We then enter a nearby cave where we find somebody resurrecting fossils with their Celebi. Her name is Nora, and she is a little bit like us because Mew chose us as their guardian, and she has been chosen by Celebi. She's going to become our second rival as we have to face her already in a tournament that's coming up in the trainer school. First, we easily destroy Damian with our Darumaka Shadow Sneaks, and at the last round of the tournament we face Nora. Iceman is able to take out their Swaddle and Trapinch with Icy Winds and Ice Shards, and Totodile gets destroyed by returners Feint Attack and Shadow Sneak. And that's our tournament 1, but we don't really win anything from it, except for closer bonds with our friends. So they try to race us to the next town, but we don't have time for a race as we need to capture a couple more Pokemon and trade them in for tiny little eggs. Getting ourselves a big fat boy Munchlax, and then going to a Riolu temple where we see the Abyssal Cult trying to abduct it. Luckily they get stopped by a Mega Lucario who I would like to add to the team, but instead I get myself a nice Chimchar, something I can't really complain about. And then a Duskull, which I'm not too happy about, but I'll take it. I then channel my inner Discord mod and buy a fedora to signal to everybody around me that I am maidenless. We then do some sightseeing and find a statue of Yearn, the second augur. And then we hatch even more eggs, getting ourselves a Vullaby, a Delta Purloin, and a Carbink. Eventually we even got our face on TV as a side quest needed us to capture a random Axew somewhere. The same TV company also brought me to a desert where we found a Delta Grimer. And out of these 2 eggs we get a Magnemite and a Seviper. Once I was done building my team, I challenged the first gym leader who was friends with a White Rock. Reminds me of a certain green-haired guy in the Unova region. But this guy's name is Orion. And he starts off with a Vulpix who sets up a Drought. So he is running a Fire-type team. My Seviper easily takes care of it with a couple of Poison Fangs, but then he sends out Charmeleon who I can also Poison Fang once more before taking too much damage and having to go into Hellspawn who can then take it out with a Pursuit and a couple of Smogs. Deerling was taken out by my Monferno's Fire Pledge, and my Seviper's Poison Fangs easily took care of his final Pokemon, Ivysaur. Once the gym battle was over, my Hellspawn evolved into a Whirlipede who looks like a burning tire from Cars, and then the gym gets barraged with people, a gym leader from another town, and another evil organization arrives with Kyurem. They first make fun of him that he's friends with a rock, but then they explain that it's actually Reshiram and get him out. They first fight a little bit, but then Reshiram flees and comes back. The name of this very disturbing looking fella with the bowl haircut is Teen, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of him. But first we leave Reshiram in Orion's care and move on with our journey, by getting a Sableye and a Marill from some more eggs. Once we grinded up our entire team, we ran into Nora again. And this time she's not playing around, she has a pretty difficult team to beat. Starting off with a Honedge who we can still easily kill with a Fire Pledge from Monferno, and as you can see, my Pokemon reached the level cap as they can't gain any more than 1 experience. I deal with Croconaw by swapping out into my own water type as a Marill and taking it out with 2 Play Roughs. We then have to face a mythical this early into the game, Celebi, so I go into Axew, thinking Dragon Rage will at least do half, but it doesn't. So I have to get out of there and swap in Darumaka. He's able to Shadow Sneak, then Feint Attack, and the Celebi goes down. But we also took quite a lot of damage from Magical Leaf. Taking down her Fluette was a piece of cake with Medusa's Poison Fangs, and Golbat definitely gave me a scare by confusing me hitting myself with my confusion a couple of turns in a row, and then having to swap out into Scolipede, who could then Rock Blast and Flame Charge it to get some extra speed for the next Pokemon Swadloon. Another Rock Blast and a Flame Charge later, and we have defeated Nora without any deaths. But this is an important turning point in the game as we unlock our own secret base, and in this secret base we can place an EV trainer, an EV resetter, and also EXP trainers so that we can level up our Pokemon fast but at a small fee. And these trainers are why money is super important in this game, and you don't want to waste it on stuff like fedoras. We do immediately use these trainers to evolve our Darumaka into Darmanitan, and this thing looks very menacing. I wouldn't want to come up against this if I was my opponent. We then all of a sudden find ourselves in the next gym led by Xavier. He specializes in bug and poison types. and I haven't really gotten a lot of stuff out of my eggs that can deal with these types. But this gym leader does start off with something that I do not want to see because I have arachnophobia, but a spider metang. Luckily he is bug ground type and my Azumarill can easily one-shot it with an Aqua Tail, but he manages to set up a sticky web which is going to slow down my Pokemon throughout this fight. I also managed to get another Aqua Tail off on the next Pokemon Gengar before getting burned and having to swap out into Darmanitan. First I get Venoshocked, but then I counter back with the Shadow Sneak to take out Gengar. For his Mega Beedrill, I first swap out into Tauros to get the Intimidate off. I then take a Poison Jab and hit back with a Zen Headbutt to do a decent amount of damage but not take it out. I was going to sack my Tauros here by going for another Zen Headbutt, but he swaps out into Tentacruel, letting me get a free hit in. I was expecting a Sludge Bomb here, so I swapped out into Magneton, and that paid off because I got a free switch. I then used Charge Beam 2 times in a row to take it out, and then he brings in Heracross. I go back into Azumarill because it's pretty bulky, but I get critted by an Earthquake, and Azumarill goes down. First death of the run. I then bring out my Volibee with Eviolite and plug the Heracross a couple of times. Eventually he swaps out into Croagunk, I take that thing down with a pluck as well. And then he brings out his Mega Beedrill again, I can easily take a Poison Jab from this, hit back with a pluck, and now he only has Heracross left. I was expecting a close combat here, so I went into Darmanitan and predicted it, went for Shadow Sneak and took out Heracross. Second gym badge has been acquired, we also acquired another egg and get a Starly. We find ourselves in the local dump after that as the Abyssal Cult has captured Damian and put him in the middle of a pond that's filled with radioactive waste. But our Mew manages to help him out a little bit by summoning Shaman, who can clean polluted rivers with its Seed Flare ability. Shaman now chooses Damian as his guardian, so now we have even more in common. Once the Abyssal Cult is scared off, we get ourselves some really good encounters out of our eggs. We first get a Honedge, one of the best Pokemon we can get, period. A Bulbasaur who is going to become a very nice Venusaur later, and then a Chinchou, which will eventually turn into a very bulky Lantern. We also found some fossils running loose in a lab, so once we snipe everybody down one by one, we turn them in and get a Gulpin. Another cult has been spotted around Kanto, and this one is the Sky Cult for Rayquaza, and they work together to push a hiker in a hole in a cave. This is even worse than Team Rocket taking over the radio tower in Johto and doing nothing with it. Eventually we try to leave this cave ourselves, but Damian stops us for another battle. And the match doesn't really start off in our favor, as our Staraptor is only left with 1 HP after an overheat from the Infernape. We do finish it off with an Aerial Ace and a Quick Attack, but Staraptor definitely had some Vietnam flashbacks there. He then has a Luxray, and I was thinking it's going to go for an Electric type move, so I go into Venusaur, but I get Fire Fanged. So then I go into Infernape instead, and take it out with a close combat and a Mach Punch, but a Wild Charge almost took me down. Since we do have 5 HP left, we can also take out the next Pokemon Groudon with a close combat. For Metang, I go into Darmanitan and Phantom Force it. For some reason, he sends out Venusaur, who's also weak to Ghost type moves, so another Phantom Force kills it. And the thing that looks the least menacing, but is probably the most menacing, Shaman, is able to bring down my Darmanitan, my Fracture, and my Lantern, all into one-hit kill ranges. So I only have Venusaur left. But Venusaur can't touch it, so I tried to stay in with Lantern and go for the Signal Beam, thinking it would take me out with Energy Ball, but luckily it went for Psychic for some stupid reason, and my Signal Beam could take it out and win me the battle without losing anybody, but everybody being almost dead. We do smear the victory all over his face and then hatch a really important Pokemon, Chespin. We find some Sharpedos swimming around in the house, and indeed, how does that even work? And then we somehow found our way into the ghetto of a town called the Black Market. We can do some illegal stuff like get even more boxes by letting a guy hack into it and buy a Super Rod off the market for $0. And we don't speak about what they're doing here. But all the way at the end in a warehouse, we see Rukra and Teen banding together as their cult is called the Perfection Cult. They want to create the perfect Pokemon and become the strongest trainers of them all. These two actually made all of the Delta Pokemon you see all around the region because they thought Delta Pokemon were going to be stronger, but actually they just have a different type. They're also tampering with Mega Evolution to try to bring out potential in Pokemon that don't have Mega Evolutions yet. So definitely some very interesting stuff, but we can't really get through here without their permission, and we only get that if we can beat them in a Pokemon battle. I knew he was going to start off with a Machamp, so my Staraptor's Intimidate is amazing here. I also use a Feather Dance to lower its attack even more, getting hit with a Dynamic Punch, but then swapping out into Chestnut to take a Stone Edge. I decide to go for some Seed Bombs and Synthesises, but this thing keeps on confusing me with Dynamic Punch because it has no guard, which means Dynamic Punch is never going to miss. Eventually, the Machamp does run out of Dynamic Punches, and this is my cue to fully heal up and kill it with a couple more Seed Bombs. For Pyroar, I swapped out into Infernape, taking a Flyer Blast and countering back with a Close Combat to take it out in one hit. They then somehow managed to give Stunfisk a Mega Evolution. And I'm very glad this thing doesn't exist, because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have nightmares about it tonight. But we have the perfect counter for this. Our Venusaur is going to come in, Sleep Powder it, put a Leech Seed on it, and then Amnesia up, because this is a special attacker, so that we can easily take it out with some Razor Leaves after that. Kyurem was his last Pokemon, and luckily we set up all of these Amnesias because now his Ice Beams are doing barely anything. He first sets up a Substitute, which is hard to break with my Razor Leaves, but once I do it, I manage to put it to sleep and then put a Leech Seed on him as well, and that's the end of Kyurem. Because this allows me to swap out into Infernape and take it out with a Close Combat. Grumpig is the only Pokemon left, so my Phantom Force from Darmanitan is easily able to one-shot it. We now get permission to go on with our journey and find ourselves in the next gym leader's room. But the Augur is here as well. As it turns out, this leader is a Flying type user. Is this a coincidence with the Sky Cult that just showed up out of nowhere? Absolutely not, because as we tell the Augur that a Sky Cult is plotting some really evil stuff by summoning Rayquaza, he starts to summon all of the grunts of the Sky Cult himself, as he is apparently the leader of the Sky Cult. I know, big plot twist, and he forces me to fight the gym leader so that he can go up to the top of this tower and summon Rayquaza. We need his gym badge anyway, so let's see if we can easily take care of him and try and stop the Augur. Lantern does some incredible work by discharging the Skarmory and doing a lot of damage before he swaps out into Kingdra so that we can take that thing down with a couple of discharges as well. He tanks a Draco Meteor from the next Pokemon Noivern and hits back with a critical hit discharge to also cripple him a little bit. Once his amazing work is done, I can now swap into my Aegislash because the Noivern special attack has been lowered quite a bit, and set up a Sword Stance, but I did get hit with a critical hit, and that did way more damage than I wanted it to do. I then finished it off with an Iron Head before Talonflame coming in and me having to swap out because otherwise I can't hit it anymore because of my Life Orb. Scully Beats Rock Blast are 4 times super effective, so only one of those can take it out, but a Brave Bird also put me down to 37 HP. So once Mega Altaria comes out, I swap out into my Magneton with Air Balloon, take an Earthquake, and then kill it with 2 Flash Cannons. We can also get a bunch of free hits on the next Pokemon Gliscor with Flash Cannons, but eventually we used it so much that we ran out of PP and have to swap out into Iceman. I am able to hit an Ice Shard on this Gliscor, but that is about it because an Earthquake does too much damage, takes out my favorite Vanilla Ice Cone. We still have Haxorus in the back though, and with some Dragon Claws we force a switch out into Skarmory, which we can take out with even more Dragon Claws, and then also eventually swapping out back into Gliscor, taking him out, and getting another gym badge under our belt. We may have lost our Ice Cone, but that's not really an important Pokemon, since we immediately get some really cool Pokemon in return, like a Litwick and a Delta Chinchou, which is a Ghost Fire type. And this is what Lantern looks like, and it has access to Tail Glow, so a +3 in special attack in 1 turn is something I'm not going to just ignore. Once we're done admiring our new teammates, we go to the top of the tower and see that Yearn has summoned Rayquaza with this big crystal looking thing. Rayquaza immediately joins his team and turns into Mega Rayquaza. Luckily, this is the only Pokemon we have to face and not an entire team after it. I first get Dragon Ascended, and then I hit it with a Discharge. He has a white herb, so the defense lowering doesn't matter, but what does matter is that my Discharge managed to paralyze it, and I also managed to hit another Discharge while taking an extreme speed with only 2 HP left. I then swap in Aegislash, but Dragon Ascend does more damage than I would have expected, so I go into Scolipede instead, and with 2 Rock Blasts, we take out Rayquaza. Once he's defeated, Damian helps us by summoning Shaman and shattering the crystal into a billion pieces with its Seed Flare. Still in shock that the Augur is actually a bad guy, we start scheming a plan to take them down ourselves. We have to go to the library to read some books and try to understand more of what's happening. So we took our trusty running shoes and ran to the library, something I would never do in real life. But before we can enter the library, we get to choose whether we fight Damian or Nora. And since we just fought Damian, I am going to be fighting Nora. She started off with an Aegislash of her own, and I didn't really swap out Lantern, so I have to go into Returner, put a Will-O-Wisp on the Aegislash, but this did mean that she could set up a free Swords Dance. It also means that she went for King Shield after, and Phantom Force goes through King Shield so we can one-shot this Aegislash. Since his next Pokemon is Florges, I go into my Scolipede and set up 3 Sharpens because it basically cannot touch me. My Rock Blast then finish it off, and then Celebi gets one-shotted by a Steamroller. We also Rock Blast the next Pokemon Leavanny just once to take it out, and then Flygon comes out. But this is not a regular Flygon, this is Mega Flygon. Definitely one of the strongest Pokemon I've had to face yet. It's finally got its bug dragon typing like everyone wants, which does mean it's now weak to my Rock Blasts. So I get hit pretty hard but counter back and manage to one-shot it. Crobat is the last Pokemon left, so I swap out into my electric type Shiftry here. And just as I was about to take out the Crobat with my 3rd Charge Beam, I hit myself in my confusion, and the poison damage from a Toxic that I've been hit with is racking up too. We do have another electric type to deal with Crobat, so I go into Lantern, Discharge, and enter the library. In the library itself, we find ourselves an orb at the back of it in like a storage room, and this weird library person here with the purple hair followed us. He quote-unquote works here, but I don't trust him. Anyway, back to the orb. It's apparently the red orb to summon Groudon with, and it's being guarded by a ghost from the past, which we have to beat in a Pokemon battle. And despite being a ghost of some kind herself, her entire team is weak to ghost-type moves. So my Darmanitan can one-shot Claydol, Delphox. Aegislash takes a couple more hits to go down, but eventually also falls to the might of my Darmanitan. Jellicent and Gengar are no better, as they both get one-shot as well. And our final Pokemon is a Mega Banette, who I burn with Will-O-Wisp before swapping out. And bringing in Chestnut and stalling it out with Bulk Ups because it always goes for Destiny Bond and I don't really want to go down. So after I stalled out Destiny Bond, I then take it out with C-Bomb. Once we defeat this ghost, she tells us that one of us is going to join the Infernal Cult and betray all of their friends. Well, it's not gonna be me, so it's either gonna be one of these guys. So now I don't trust anybody anymore. We do decide to talk it out and promise to not join the Infernal Cult, and instead hatch a radioactive waste Numel and evolve it into Camerupt, who's got Tactical Mask Pro on. And we go from boring place to boring place, going from a library to a museum. But in this museum, there is a blue orb to summon Kyogre, and it's guarded by exactly 1 security guard. So guess what? The leader of the Abyssal Cult comes along and just snags it up. So now we have to track her down and take this thing back to the museum where it belongs. But first we get some more hatchlings. Starting off with a Delta Ralts, an electric ice type, and then finding a Delta Axew, which is a water steel type. But this Delta Axew is somebody we have to trade away for another egg, and out of this egg we get even more Delta Pokemon like Misdreavus, an Ice Fairy type, but also a Delta Baneri, which I never use, and then a Ghastly, which could come in handy since Gengar is always a little bit overpowered. We then double evolve our Ralts into Kirlia and then Gardevoir. Please don't simp over this thing like everybody simps over the regular God of War. We do have to put on our scuba gear and go underwater because the Abyssal Cultists are first going after Lugia before they try and summon Kyogre. Audrey managed to get Lugia on her team pretty fast, and as you may know, Abyssal Cult uses water type teams, so she is running a rain team. And starting off with a lantern, so I'm leading off with my Haxorus, setting up 3 swords dances and then taking it out with Dragon Claw. She then has a Delta Superior, which is a dragon water type. I get hit with an ice beam but managed to survive, and then counter back with that Dragon Claw that takes her Perrier down. For Ludicolo, I decide to swap out into Camerupt because it's the only thing I have that's super effective against it. I managed to take a Hydro Pump and then counter back with a Gunk Shot to take the Dancing Duck down. He then has me on his team, and I know that I can't take a little leaf to the face, so a Seed Bomb from my Chestnut is easily going to take care of Swampert. A Mega Crawdaunt is the next Pokemon we have to face, so I start hitting it with Seed Bombs, eventually getting hit with a Superpower as well, but it's good that we're physically bulky and another Seed Bomb wins us this matchup. Lugia was no problem as the combined efforts of Lantern and Gardevoir's discharges and Thunderbolts sink the legendary bird back to the ocean. The Abyssal Cult then swift swims out of there, and we get to go on another long route where somewhere behind the trees, 2 leaders of 2 cults are planning something. As it turns out, I have lost my memory, which I didn't realize up until this point, and they found some information about another crystal that could change the course of time. But enough of that shenanigans, let's hatch another egg and get ourselves a Delta Sableye, which is Fire Rock type. And then we find Harmony again, who we met at the first gym when Reshiram and Kyurem were fighting. She is the next gym leader and has Fairy types. Luckily for us, we have got quite a few of Steel and Poison types in the past. So let's see if we can easily take her down. So she starts off with a Delta Crustle, which is a Fairy type. Don't know if it has another typing, but I swap out Venusaur after hitting a Sleep Powder and a Leech Seed on it to go into Aegislash. And I can just keep Swords Dancing up, then using King Shield, and then eventually trying to go for a Shadow Sneak, but as it turns out, it is a normal type, so we can't hit it with Shadow type moves. Eventually I'm able to take it down with an Iron Head though, and still have quite a lot of HP remaining. So next up she goes into Sylveon. I set up a King Shield to have more defenses. Then I get hit with a Shadow Ball after that, and I still live with 22 HP and take out Sylveon with Iron Head. Next one out is a Miltank, but not a regular Miltank, a Mega Miltank. So this is like Whitney's Gym, but on steroids. As it turns out, this thing cannot touch my regular Gengar, so I swap out into it, and because it only has Body Slam and Earthquake as attacking moves, I can just keep Dark Pulsing away at it until it eventually swaps out into Azumarill. Once that happens, I go into Venusaur, put the Azumarill to sleep, and start spamming Petal Blizzard until we take it out. She now goes into Gardevoir, I bring in Magnezone, Flash Cannon it, and then try to take it out with Charge Beam to try and get a special attack boost, but instead she swaps out into Togekiss, letting me get a free hit on it, which means that I can bring in Swalot to turn after and clean up with Gunk Shot. She brings out Miltank again, so I know I can take an Earthquake with Swalot unless it crits, and I can put a Toxic on the Miltank if I do. Once that happens, I swap out into Gengar again, and Dark Pulse away so that I can take out Gardevoir and Miltank easy peasy. Once we're done getting our next gym badge, we travel to an old person home, and in the basement, Rukra and Teen are plotting even more schemes. As it turns out, Harmony's father is in this retirement home, and he's very sick, and Rukra has made some kind of medicine to cure him together with Deoxys DNA. So after talking a little bit, we go up to the old man's room, but as it turns out, the medicine that Rukra is proposing is just the Pokerus virus, which makes Pokemon gain more experience and stuff. So it's not really a bad virus, so what would happen if we put it into a human? Let's find out. He wakes up and seems like he's not sick anymore, but yeah, his body turns into a half of a Deoxys. So I wouldn't use the Pokerus virus on people anymore. but this guy now wants to take over the world as well. And then all of a sudden, Damian enters the room and gets kidnapped by this Deoxys old man fusion. After a little bit more arguing, we finally get to go on our way and go and find Damian. But first, we have to hatch some more eggs, getting an Aerodactyl, a Goomy, and then the best Pokemon of all time, a Sunkern. Then a big phenomenon happened. This person managed to get a Wailord into his house and still have a bunch of room. How did he do it? Probably by shrinking it, because otherwise this is not possible. Eventually we find ourselves in a lab where we meet up with the next gym leader. She's busy with scientific stuff, but still wants to take us on as a challenger. But as we walk outside of the lab, a big storm happens all of a sudden. This is not something that can normally happen, except with the help of the Pokemon Kyogre. And then the leader of the Abyssal Cult comes flying about on her Lugia, and she's like, if you want this rain to stop, you better come to my base and beat me up. So that's what we're gonna do. But first we find her uniform laying on some kind of table, and I do not feel comfortable touching this, but we have to get the DNA off of it, you know? So now we can transform into a woman and walk past all of the defenses of this base. Once we reach her in her big basement area, she starts talking about 97% of the ocean hasn't been explored yet, and that we know more about the moon than about the ocean, which is true. And she wants to know more about the sea because she thinks there is really strong creatures down there that she wants to command and take over the world with. And since Kyogre is kind of the Poseidon of the Pokemon world, she's using him to summon all of these Pokemon and get them under their control. Of course, we can't let that happen, because we're the good guy, and we do what everybody expected me to do. Challenge her to a Pokemon battle. Since I already know about half of her team, I'm going to be leading off with my Venusaur. I first put the Lantern to sleep, and then put a Leech Seed on him to then kill it with a couple of Petal Blizzards. I do get paralyzed in the process, but we have more than enough HP to still use Lantern in this battle. Once Alakazam comes out though, I go into Darmanitan taking a Psychic since I'm immune to it, and then countering back with some Shadow Sneaks, but also getting paralyzed by Thunder Wave. Eventually we overpower the Alakazam, and she brings out Serperior. I bring in Venusaur to tank a couple of Hydro Pumps and Thunders, eventually hitting the Leech Seed and putting the Serperior to sleep. Then setting up some Amnesias, and eventually taking it out with a Petal Blizzard. Since we're now at +6 in special defense, Kyogre is not going to be able to do so much damage to me anymore. I then try to put it to sleep, but I get paralyzed and miss. Luckily I have the Big Root on my Venusaur, so I get a bunch more HP back from my Leech Seeds. I then finally put it to sleep and kill it with a Petal Blizzard. Ludicolo also can't touch me anymore, so Petal Blizzard and it's down. For Crawdaunt, I decide to go into Chestnut, and he gets hit with a knockoff and then a superpower, but the superpower gets a critical hit, doing a lot of damage. So I go for the Synthesis, but because of the rain, I barely heal anything, and the Crawdaunt is able to take me out. I didn't really want to lose Chestnut there, but it does give me a switch into Elsa, who can then Thunderbolt and kill, taking out Crawdaunt and then finally ending the battle. Then Damian and the Deoxys guy comes running along, and as it turns out, she's Damian's mother. He isn't too happy about this and takes the blue orb from her, which frees Kyogre, and he drags her with him into the ocean, never to be seen again. And Damian is going to keep working with this Deoxys guy, so we're going to have to stop him as well. And once we all leave, we see some kind of Giratina looking cultist that we don't really know too much about yet, but he's definitely acting sus. But since this is now all done, we get the opportunity to take on the next gym leader. First off, she congratulates me for taking out the Abyssal Cult and then takes on my challenge. She is going to have quite a lot of Steel-type Pokemon, but also Electric types, so it's not going to be the hardest gym to take down. The first Pokemon she starts out with is a Klefki, which I can close combat with my Infernape after getting hit with a Swagger. It does one shot, but I do risk hitting myself in my confusion from here on, even though I'm at +2 in attack. She then sends out her Mega Metagross. I'm expecting a Zen Headbutt here, so I go into Darmanitan. And Will-O-Wisp to cripple the Metagross's attack and take a Meteor Mash. This allows me to go into Aegislash safely and set up 2 Swords Dances, and while she uses a full restore on the Metagross, I take it out with Shadow Sneak, because I'm at +4 in attack. She then brings out Electivire, but we also one-shot that with Shadow Sneak. Aegislash goes down the same way. We did get a critical hit, but I don't really think that mattered. For Magnezone, I used King Shield first because I wasn't sure if I was able to one-shot it. I set up another Swords Dance, but he went for Volt Switch, so he brought in Rotom Wash. Since my attack can't be any higher, I can now one-shot the Rotom, and then the final Pokemon, Magnezone, comes back out again, going for the Shadow Sneak, but not killing. Luckily for us, he didn't go for Thunderbolt, but Volt Switch, so we can survive 1 hit and take this thing down with a couple more Shadow Sneaks. We get our gym badge and follow her down to her workshop as Teen is there, and she's making a machine for him to put Zekrom into, so that Zekrom can take way more hits and can do way more damage. But she doesn't know that Teen is a bad guy. She's just doing it for the money that she gets for it. He puts Zekrom into the armor, and Orion walks in and summons his Reshiram. So this armored Zekrom takes on Reshiram, and of course Reshiram loses, giving Teen exactly what he wanted. But being the good guys that we are, we can't let Teen just walk out of here with Reshiram unharmed, so we take him on in a battle. The battle starts off pretty easy as we can one-shot his first Pokemon Grumpig with a feint attack from Returner. He then brings out the big boy Zekrom, so I put a Will-O-Wisp on him and tank an Outrage. I can then safely swap in Aegislash again, set up my 3 Swords Dances, and Shadow Sneak Zekrom to take it out. For Pyroar, I had Scolipede in the back, so I swapped them in, Rock Blasted it, and that was down. And then he brought out his Mega Pokemon, Mega Charizard X. I went for a Rock Wrecker, and that one-shotted it. This does mean that I have to wait next turn, and as he brings in Luxray and goes for Superpower, I lose my big Centipede. He also has the Flame Orb, which means he has Guts on this Luxray, but I swap in Aegislash anyway so I can King Shield and lower this thing's attack a lot. I then set up some Swords Dances, and finally managed to take it out with a critical hit, Shadow Sneak. His last Pokemon is once again Kyurem, and we don't really care about Kyurem, so we just Iron Head and Shadow Sneak it until it's down. Those substitutes didn't help him. After the battle, Teen explains that he's going to try to fuse Zekrom, Reshiram, and Kyurem all together to create the perfect dragon, which makes sense since they are the perfection cult. But I bet that this dragon couldn't stand up against my Aegislash if I have 3 Swords Dances up. But first we get another useful Pokemon out of an egg, a Lapras, named Ladpras. Gotta love that nickname. We then traversed through an entire volcano and found the Infernal Cult at the end of it, trying to summon Groudon. And this guy with the pink hair is the same guy as in the library, which means he was just spying on us. His name is Zenith, and as a leader of the Infernal Cult, he's of course going to have a lot of ground and fire types. But before we took him on, I hatched a Nidoran and a Munna out of eggs and added them to the team, because they could be very, very useful. As we start the battle against Zenith, I finally decide to bring out my Delta Lantern. I first set up a Tail Glow, get hit with an Overheat, hit back with a Dazzling Gleam, but this Blaziken is now a lot weaker because of the special attack drop. So I set up a Substitute, and with the leftovers I'm going to recover some health over time. I set up another Tail Glow because Blaziken can't break my Substitute, and I then proceed to take out Blaziken with Dazzling Gleam. Now I'm at +6, going into the next Pokemon, Excadrill. My Substitute takes the Earthquake, I counter back with a Flamethrower, and Excadrill is down. Volcarona gets scorched by Flamethrowers, and for Chandelure, I finally decided to swap out into Aerodactyl, because I knew I was not going to be able to outspeed with Lantern. I managed to get 1 crunch off, but then I got hit with a super effective Hidden Power, which brought me down to 25 HP and forced me to swap out to Darmanitan. For some reason, he swapped at the same time and brought in Diggersby. So I used the Will-O-Wisp to cripple its attack and then took it out next turn with Drain Punch. Chandelure also got taken down by a single Shadow Sneak after that, and then he has a Mega Macargo that looks like Turbo from the movie Turbo with like the snails and stuff. I immediately swapped out into Musharna because it's my special defensive wall, And as he set up a Shell Smash, I set up one Calm Mind, then I was able to tank a Fire Blast and hit back with a Psychic to take out Macargo. And that's the Infernal cultist leader defeated. He does still manage to capture Groudon despite all of our efforts. And once again, just like all of the other cult leaders, they managed to escape with a legendary that's as big as a building. We don't know what's going to happen next, so we just follow the next route, where we run into the Darkrai cultists, and they're going to try and take on the 6th gym leader, since that's her sister. And her sister is currently in control of Darkrai. But before we go and help her, we hatch a Surskit, which could come in handy with the Intimidate ability once it evolves into Masquerain. Once we arrive in front of the gym, the two sisters have a major fight. Of course, the gym leader is trying to get Persephone, which is her name, out of the Darkrai cultists thing because it's a bad thing. Of course, Persephone is not going to listen and keeps her tantrum going. That's when we step in. She, of course, isn't too happy about this and takes us on with her Dark and Ghost type team. Leading off with a Mega Gengar against my Brutus the Venusaur, sleep powdering it, and then doing my usual trick of setting up the Amnesias and doing the Leech Seeds. And once I hit this Gengar with Petal Blizzard, it turns out it's actually a Mega Zoroark, and it looks absolutely terrifying. Like something from Naruto, I think. I don't know, I've never watched that show. Once we take out the Zoroark, she brings out Greninja, who goes down the same way, Leech Seed and Petal Blizzard. Hydreigon, Leech Seed, Petal Blizzard. Is what I thought, but this Hydreigon has Roost, so I could never do enough damage to take it out because my Petal Blizzard just isn't good enough. Instead, I can swap out into my Infernape, give it the big set of punches named Close Combat, and force him out into the next Pokemon. A real Gengar this time, so I go into Darmanitan, taking a Sludge Wave pretty well, but I was actually expecting a Psychic type move. I then just go for the Shadow Sneak and manage to one-shot, and the final Pokemon is Spiritomb, who sets up a Darkened Sky, which is a new kind of weather in this game, to boost Shadow and Dark type moves. It also lets moves like Phantom Force and Shadow Force move in one turn, like Sunny Day does with Solar Beam. Anyway, I just bring out my trusty Venusaur again and put a Leech Seed on Spiritomb. Since I got hit with Phantom Force pretty hard and I got burned by Will-O-Wisp, I go into Lantern, who also doesn't take Phantom Force very well. But because a Leech Seed heals me up just enough, I can go for a Hydro Pump and then swap out Lapras to finish off Spiritomb with an Ice Shard. That's Persephone defeated, and she's not too happy about it. But she can't do anything about it right now, so she decides to flee. Then get the green light from Diana to take her on in her gym. She specializes in 2 typings just like all of the other gym leaders, Ghost and Psychic this time. And they took all of the beauty of Milotic away and just made it scary with this nice Delta form of it. Luckily, we have some super effective moves for this Milotic, and as I go for a Shadow Sneak, she luckily sets up a Calm Mind, which means that we can scoop it up the next turn with Phantom Force. Gardevoir also gets one-shotted by Phantom Force. I was going to one-shot Chandelure as well, but just as I'm about to hit, she swaps out into Cresselia. So I send in Aegislash instead. While she's setting up with Cresselia with Calm Minds, I am setting up Swords Dances with Aegislash, ultimately taking them down with a bunch of Shadow Sneak attacks. We then one-shot Chandelure after that, and we see that she has another Mega Pokemon, Mega Gothitelle. It's a 2-shot with Shadow Sneak, so not too bad, and the final Pokemon Gengar also gets one-shotted. That's 6 gym badges acquired. We're getting into the end game. We then find Teen again at the top of the Draconic Ruins, but he's already trying to summon the Ultimate Dragon. He's chanting this spell to try and fuse them together, but he doesn't know the name of the dragon. Nobody does, so the dragon can't be summoned. So instead, he gets himself a Curan White and then a Zekrom to take us on. Luckily for us, this is a double battle with Nora, so let's see how we can do. I do have to mention that just before this fight, I hatched a Trapinch and a Lotad, which I both added to the team. I also love the Mirror B reference on Ludicolo. His leading two mons are Salamence and Metagross, two powerhouses. So I led off with Lapras and Ice Beam to Salamence to take it down turn 1, but they double upped on Nora's Leavanny to take that down on our side, which I'm not too sad about because Leavanny can't really do much. Nora brings out Darmanitan and they have a Mega Typhlosion on their side. I know, it looks amazing, but this Darmanitan and the Metagross of the other side went for the Rock Slide and Earthquakes, taking down Typhlosion, but also Darmanitan on my side. Nora brings out Mega Flygon and they send out Kyurem White. Mega Flygon does quite a lot of damage with Dragon Voice, which is its new signature move, but even combined with my Lapras Surf, it doesn't do enough damage. Celebi does come out to set up a nasty plot and I bring in Lantern. I get hit with a Draco Meteor and an Earthquake, somehow manage to survive both hits, and Celebi takes out the Kyurem White. Luxray is up next, and since I'm expecting another Earthquake here, I swap out into Ludicolo. Celebi once again gets another kill, taking out the Luxray, and I take the Earthquake pretty well, as I predicted. They bring out Zekrom as their last Pokemon, and I try to go for a Surf, but I don't outspeed anything, and I go down to an Outrage. Next turn, Celebi takes out Metagross, and I just go for the King Shield and start setting up Sword Stances on Zekrom, while Nora brings out her Crobat after Celebi got destroyed by Outrage. The Crobat then went for a Super Fang, and in case I didn't kill, I went for Iron Head. Luckily, that was enough to win me the battle and reunite Reshiram and Orion again. Since they don't know the name of the dragon, I don't think they're gonna bother him anymore. But he still does have Kyurem and Zekrom on his side, which means he can still get Kyurem Black if he wanted to. Once we're done here, we have to travel a little bit further and chase down the Infernal Cult. Once we arrive at the next town, we see that the leader is holding a speech in front of the people because they have to get vaccinated for this new Deoxys virus. Little do these stupid people know that they're just taking their DNA for some kind of experiment they're doing. Once he takes us to his back room, he decides to tell us his plan that he's trying to brainwash these people, and somehow managed to succeed in brainwashing this lady who attacks me once he leaves. After easily showing her who's boss, we run into Nora and the 7th gym leader. His name is Calorith? I think that's how you pronounce that. He tells us a little bit about a nearby cave full of crystals that we are going to have to take a look at. But first we see that this house is filled with Cophagreguses, which is a little bit unsettling to think about. With that traumatizing experience out of the way, we do eventually reach the end of the cave and we meet some kind of king here. He explains a little bit about what's going on, that Arceus chose us to be these new guardians to take out the cults and save the world, but apparently there is one Pokemon in particular that Arceus wants to guard because it can destroy and create worlds with a snap of the fingers. And we don't want that Pokemon to fall into the wrong hands. So as a gift, he allows us to capture Mew and add it to our team, but little does he know that if we capture this Mew, we're just going to trade it away for an egg that might contain a Caterpie. It's not much better, it turned into a cast form, which I am going to be needing for the next gym. And that's where we're headed right now. Let's take on the Water/Rain gym. Since this gym normally has permanent rain up, I decided to take cast form with me to change it to the new night weather condition. Once that happened, cast form could die and I wouldn't care. But I decided to not let it die. I swapped that into Venusaur, put the Heliolisk to sleep, put a Leech Seed on him, and started setting up Amnesias. Once I was done with that, I started spamming Grass Knot until the Heliolisk finally fell. The next Pokemon on the list was an electric water type Dragonite with Earthquake that would hit me very hard. So I just had to hit this one Grass Knot and it was done. But of course not without getting a little bit of HP back from first putting a Leech Seed on him. He then had another Dragonite, but this time not the Delta form, so I once again did the same thing, Sleep Powder, Leech Seed, Grass Knot. Luckily for me, this was a special attacking Dragonite, so my Amnesias kind of saved me here when he hit me with the Hurricane. Next to that was Goodra, and I once again put it to sleep, put a Leech Seed on it again, but this time I swap out into Elsa and set up some Calm Mines. Once I'm at +2 in special attack and special defense, I get hit with a Toxic, so I just hit it with an Ice Beam. That's able to take it out from this range, and the next Pokemon he sent out was a Mega Politoed that kinda looks like a god. Once again, after hitting him with a Thunderbolt, it didn't go down, but he decided to swap out into Manaphy, who we could then one-shot with another Thunderbolt. Politoed came back out, and I didn't want to go down because of the toxic damage, so I swapped out into Venusaur again, Sleep Powder, Leech Seed, Grass Knot, you know the drill by now. And that way, we deserve our 7th gym badge. Nora gave us a call that we had to meet up with her, and once we do, Teen comes running about as well, and says that he can help us if we decide to come back to their lab down at the black market. Once we're there though, the only thing they seem to want from us is some DNA from Mew so that they can create their very own Mewtwo, as they're still in the search for the perfect Pokemon. For some stupid reason, we decide to say yes to this incredible proposal, and once they're done creating their very own Mewtwo, they challenge us to a battle to test its power. But his entire team was just a one-shot sweep all the way through with Aegislash after I set up 3 Swords Dances on Poliwrath. Taking down said Poliwrath with Shadow Sneaks, Darmanitan with a Shadow Sneak as well. Mega Zebstrika also goes down to a single Shadow Sneak. Gallade and Mewtwo, you guessed it, Shadow Sneaked, and the final Pokemon Kyurem went down to Iron Head. After the battle, Rukra gets a little bit angry, but he tells us that he's been in contact with the Deoxys fused with the man guy. As it turns out, they're waiting for us down at Rose Mountain, which is where we're headed next, so that we can negotiate with them, or maybe even beat them up in a Pokemon battle. As it turns out, negotiating it is. They let a ladder down for us, and the only thing we have to do is get up it. But Damian, our friend here, has now been totally corrupted by the virus himself, so we're still going to have to try and save him. We managed to reach the Infernal Cult's hideout, but once we step in, we get captured and put in a cage. And the leader of the cultists here is able to control people by stealing their DNA. And just as he's about to try it with us, he gets called up for something urgent. So we start bothering the grunt that's guarding our cage, beat him up, and get his DNA so that we can transform into him. This allows us to roam freely across the base, and eventually we even disguise ourselves as a grunt standing next to him while he's giving an interview to the press. Me and the 7th gym leader then try to ambush him just as he's about to give his interview, but the 7th gym leader gets destroyed by a pitfall, and now we're all alone against him and his legendary Pokemon Groudon and Heatran. But that doesn't mean we're going to back down from this fight. Let's see if we can save the region again. He starts off with an Excadrill, and I decided to lead with my Darmanitan, and I put a Will-O-Wisp on it, but I also got Iron-Headed, which left me with only 86 HP. Then I once again swapped out into Aegislash, did what Aegislash does best, and killed it with a Shadow Sneak after setting up my Swords Dances. We then managed to also one-shot Chandelure, and Heatran survived a Shadow Sneak, was going to kill my Aegislash with a Magma Storm, but missed, because Magma Storm just isn't accurate enough. A single Shadow Sneak later, and it's down though. Then we also managed to one-shot Volcarona, Mega Blaziken, and finally Primal Groudon came out. Here I was prepared to sack my Aegislash again in order to try and do as much damage as possible to this thing. And as I set up my King Shield, he went for Swords Dance, then I hit it back with an Iron Head, but he missed his Precipice Blades, which meant I could just Shadow Sneak him one more time to take out Groudon and save my own ass by keeping Aegislash alive. Once our battle is over, Zenith collapses on the table and the Oracle from the library comes in and says that everything was fake. Just her pulling all the strings and making sure the Infernal Cultist would be stopped by me. Once that's done, we talk to the camera guys and they expose everything about the Infernal Cult, which means that they're now wiped of the planet Earth. Eventually, we start running across the region again and run into the old man. He tells us that something incredible is about to happen at Shade Forest and that we shouldn't follow him, but if we do, it will be life-threatening. And since we're all about chasing those highs right here, we're just going to follow him, but not before we get ourselves a new egg. Out of this egg comes a Delta Munchlax, a grass type that's very bulky and might get used a little bit further in the future. But our next stop is actually the Darkrai cultist's base, where Persephone is once again trying to summon Darkrai. This time she decides to threaten Darkrai by keeping Cresselia in her Pokeball forever if he doesn't cooperate, because apparently they're very good buddies. But just at the right moment, the two Deoxys guys come and save the day. But as it turns out, it doesn't really matter that they showed up because Darkrai sends us all to a dream realm where a bunch of people have been trapped before, called the Prion site. Before we go any further into the Prion site though, I decided to add this Delta Misdreavus to the team and evolve it into Delta Mismagius. Then I roam around these new lands and eventually battle Persephone. This girl here starts off with a Mega Spiritomb. Imagine if this thing actually existed. Pokemon wouldn't be a children's game anymore. So let's try to wipe it from the face of the earth by burning it with my Darmanitan. Then swapping in my new Mismagius and killing it with a Moonblast. Metagross then comes out and I know that I can't really stay in here, so I swap into Aegislash, set up my Swords Dances again and kill it with Shadow Sneak. For Houndoom I swap in Lapras, kill it with a bunch of Serves, but first I get hit with some Fire Blast and she wastes some full restores. With Alakazam, I was kind of just expecting a Psychic type move, so I went to Darmanitan. Luckily, it went for Focus Blast, and I Shadow Sneaked it twice to take it out again. For Hydreigon, I decided to go for a Drain Punch, and it barely survives, and just as I'm about to take it out, she swaps out into Gengar. Luckily, I went for Shadow Sneak to try and take out the Hydreigon, but Gengar didn't take this very well and went down to another one, which meant that Hydreigon also went down after that with a Shadow Sneak, winning me the battle. We now finally get access to the entire Dream World and manage to find our two Deoxys lovers. And they're not too happy anymore since we're always standing in their way and they want to take me out. Luckily for us, we're not going down without a fight, so we're taking on Corrupted Damian. He now has a Deoxys of his own, which I can easily take down with 2 Shadow Sneaks from Darmanitan. For Shaymin, I swap out into Mismagius, taking an Energy Ball with barely any HP left and then countering back with a critical hit Frost Breath. Luckily for us, Frost Breath is always a critical hit. We then see a Pokemon we haven't seen before, a Delta Luxray, a Poison Steel type, who gets dealt with by my Venusaur by putting a Sleep Powder on him and then a Leech Seed. Once that has happened, this Luxray just went for Roar every single turn, ultimately taking himself down in the process. He only has 2 Pokemon left, a Metagross and a Mega Venusaur, so I swap in my Aegislash, put on 2 Swords Dances, and kill both of them with Shadow Sneaks again. Once the battle is over, Damian hands me the Crystal Piece, which means that he still has some good in him, and then they flee to find another way out of this world. Which means we get to explore to our free will and eventually find a gym, a fully functioning gym in this world. Once we're done doing all of the mirror puzzles, we eventually find that the gym leader down here is the 8th and last one we have to face. As it turns out, he was the first Augur before the guy from the Sky Cult. He's been banished down here because he was first entrusted with the crystal that we now have a piece of by Cynthia, Steven, and 2 other trainers that we don't know the name of. They are basically the best trainers in the world and have been chosen by Arceus to protect the crystal, but they decided to give it to this guy right here, Adam. And once he's done telling me all this, it turns out that he's also my father and that he's been trapped here by Persephone and Darkrai. He also has the power of Hoopa to travel through dimensions with hyperspace holes, and once we beat him in a battle, he's going to give me that power too. So I can't wait to see what my father has in store for me. He starts off with a Greninja and I'm leading with Mismagius. I first get served but manage to survive and hit back with a Moonblast, taking out Greninja. Then he has a Delta Roserade, a Fairy Dark type, which we can outspeed and then take out with Moonblast. I'm not really that good against Steel types, so I'm going to swap out once he brings in Bisharp, and I decide to bring in Darmanitan and go for the 4x super effective Drain Punch to take it out. Tyranitar is also weak to this, and we manage to one-shot again. But then, he has a Mega Hydreigon, which hits 5 times in a row. Somehow, we managed to survive a Dragon Pulse and hit back with a Drain Punch, but we don't have enough HP remaining to take another one. And the Hydreigon just grew a couple more heads, which means it's now going to attack 7 times in a row. Not really knowing what to do, I swap out into Venusaur, and luckily he used a full restore. So I was able to put it to sleep and tank a Dark Pulse. Then I put my usual Leech Seed on it, and set up my Amnesias because this Hydreigon only has special attacking moves. Once I'm fully set up, I finally finish it off with some Grass Knots, but then his final Pokemon Spiritomb comes out. And it went down the same way. Sleep Power, Leech Seed, Grass Knot. father defeated, last gym badge acquired, time to gain Hoopa's power and try and save the world. Once we arrive back in the regular region by going through one of Hoopa's space portals, we see that the Augur is fighting one of the Giratina cultists and has just lost with his Rayquaza against a regular Garchomp. As it turns out, he only battled him to win the crystal part back that he has. I have the other two, which means that the Giratina cult's next target has got to be me. But before we go and chase him, the Augur comes up and the press starts interviewing him and slandering him for being the worst Augur ever. Then he runs off and we find him back in the Crystal Cave. And he blames me for everything that had happened to his reputation since the entire region hates him now. And this is where he takes us on in another battle. And the first turn of the battle is a mirror match. Aegislash versus Aegislash. We do the regular King Shield Swords Dance strategy, eventually we're all up to snuff with our +6 in attack, and then we kill Aegislash with Shadow Sneak. The next Pokemon is Salamence, who lowers our attack by 1 stage, but we can still take it out with Iron Head, but not after getting hit with an Earthquake. Next one out is Gudra, so I get some HP back by using King Shield, then take it out with another Shadow Sneak. He then sends out his Mega Rayquaza. I first go for the King Shield as he tries to take me down with Dragon Ascend. This lowers his attack by 2 stages, forcing him to go for a Dragon Dance next turn, which means that I can take him out with an Iron Head. Next one out is Arcanine, who is going to try and hit me with Flare Blitz, so I go for the King Shield, and then I have to swap out because I know I can't one-shot this thing anymore, because he lowered my attack with another Intimidate. Luckily for us, this Arcanine is now at -2 in attack, so I can safely bring in Lapras, Dragon Dance twice to up my speed, and then take it out with Surfs. His last Pokemon is a Lucario, but luckily I can just go for Aegislash's King Shields and Swords Dances again to eventually take it out with another Shadow Sneak. That's the Augur defeated, so that we can finally reach the end of the cave, jump through a hyperspace hole, and find ourselves in a very weird dimension where we see other parts of other regions. Like the Pokemon Mansion, Cave of Origin, Pokemon Tower, and eventually Rainbow Road from Mario Kart. And eventually we reach the throne room of the Giratina cult. And we meet up with their leader named Nyx. And as it turns out, he was behind everything. The creation of the Infernal cult, them trying to steal the crystal back from my father, the oracle in the library. It was all them, just manipulating people to try to get through the crystal. He then also explains that Arceus is not the creator of everything, but rather that he stole the crystal and put the blame on Giratina, so that Arceus is actually the bad guy. And he trapped the people of the Giratina cult in the distortion world, which transformed them and made them look like stick figures made out of glass. And as it turns out, all they really want is their world back. But they can't do that without the crystal, and that's why they challenge me here. And now to the final battle of good and evil, even though we don't really know if the evil is really evil. And so we battle the Forgotten One, Nyx. He has quite an unusual starter Pokemon, leading off with an Aurorus. And did I mention that this is not a regular battle but an inverted one, so moves that are normally not very effective are now super effective, and the other way around. Luckily I started off with Venusaur, but this Aurorus has Thunderbolt, which is super effective against me. I do once again put it to sleep, Leech Seed and Amnesia up. I keep putting it to sleep and eventually start hitting it with Sludge Bombs. Since it's now super effective, I do quite a lot of damage, but since I can't take it out quickly enough, he decides to swap out into Greninja, who goes for Ice Beam despite it now being not very effective, so I can easily take it out with 2 Sludge Bombs again. Then we also take out Aurorus before he brings out Kangaskhan. I get Body Slammed, bringing me down into red HP, but then I also managed to put the Kangaskhan to sleep. He's now also Mega Evolved, so I decide to bring in Darmanitan and hit it with a Phantom Force since it's not being negated anymore by its normal typing. He then brings out Garchomp, so I go into Gardevoir. We can take an Earthquake since it's not very effective, counter back with a Thunderbolt, and easily finish off Garchomp. The next 2 Pokemon are both grass types, Breloom and Exeggutor, which means that we can Thunderbolt both of them and win against this entity. After the battle, they disappear into nothing, Nora heals us up, and then Giratina shows up. Once Giratina has been summoned, he then Mega Evolves as I enter the battle, not into Origin form, but into something 10 times more dangerous. Since I thought Giratina was going to be a dragon ghost type, I decided to lead off with Miss Magus. I somehow managed to hit 2 frost breaths with Snowy, doing more than half of its HP and damage. Then I swap out into Venusaur and try to hit it with a sludge bomb, but it's not affected by it. So I go into Snowy again to try and kill it with another Frost Breath, but it doesn't work out because he goes for Shadow Force, so I swap in Lapras instead. I get hit with the Shadow Force and the Shadow Claw manage to survive and counter back with an Ice Beam and an Ice Shard to take down this, I'm gonna call it Eternal Form Giratina. Once Giratina is destroyed, we have saved the entire region from destined destruction. Which means that we can now go and try to complete our very own goal of beating the game and destroying the Elite Four and Champion 2. But before we do that, we hatch the funniest Pokemon out of an egg, Delta Ditto. I absolutely love it, it's just like a rock with eyes. I also decided to evolve my Delta Munchlax into Delta Snorlax and add it to the team. And then I start prepping my League team going with Aegislash, Delta Misdreavus, Lantern, Venusaur, Delta Darmanitan, and then Delta Snorlax as well. And with this team, I went to challenge the first Elite Four member, London, as he starts off with a Mega Reuniclus that looks like it just crawled out of someone's basement. In this fight there's also a permanent Trick Room up, so I decided to just lead off with my Sword and Shield and take out the Reuniclus fair and square with 2 Shadow Sneaks without setting up. Then he has a Delta Aggron with Drought. So I decide to go for King Shield while he uses Flare Blitz so I can lower its attack by 2 stages. I swap in Lantern after that, hit a Hydro Pump, but also get hit very hard with a Flare Blitz and an Earthquake, leaving me burned and with only 32 HP, causing me to swap out into Aegislash again. Luckily for us, the AI decides to go for Heavy Slam, which does no damage to me. I then click King Shield, Swords Dance, King Shield, Swords Dance, until the Aggron is at -6 in attack. And once I was able to set up everything, I then proceeded to sweep him with Shadow Sneak and then kill Marowak with Iron Head, his Delta Golurk, which is a Steel Fighting type with a Shadow Sneak as well, Togekiss with an Iron Head, and the final Pokemon Jellicent again with a Shadow Sneak. And this brings us to our second Elite Four member, which seems to be an Ice type user, and her name is Yuki. Leading off with a Mamoswine who I can kill with an Iron Head and a Shadow Sneak, but he was able to set up some Stealth Rocks. Then bringing out her very own Fridge, but I know that this thing is Choice Scarfed, and after it goes for a Thunderbolt, I bring in my Snorlax. I then proceed to use Belly Drum and heal myself up with Synthesis to put myself at max attack, and also fully heal myself up. In the process, I did get paralyzed, but that didn't matter too much as I was able to take out the Fridge with a Wood Hammer, and the next Pokemon Starmie did hit me with a Psy Shock, but I managed to take it out with Earthquake. Then she brings out a very cool Pokemon, an Ice Fighting type Scizor, so I bring in Lantern and take a close combat with only 65 HP remaining. But this did lower its defenses, which meant that I could swap out into Aegislash and take an Icicle Crash. Then I went for the King Shield because I knew this thing had knockoff to lower its attack by 2 stages again and cripple it even more. I then managed to cripple its attack even more by going for King Shield Swords Dance a couple of times until I'm at +6, and then I take it out with Shadow Sneak, which means that I can now take out the rest of her team, a Mega Cryonicle with Shadow Sneak as well, and finally a Delta Trevenant again with Shadow Sneak. That is the second Elite Four member defeated. Let's move on to Edouard, the next one, and he is a ground type user, not something my team is very well built around. But I do start off with something that's effective against most ground types, my Mismagius, killing his Hippowdon in one hit with Frost Breath. Cacturne was also an easy one-shot with Frost Breath, but then Excadrill came out, something I knew I couldn't one-shot. So I brought in Chubbs, the only one that could easily take a hit from it. I went for a Drain Punch, but it didn't heal me enough, so I was ready to let Chubbs go down so that I could freely bring in somebody else. Luckily, he went for Swords Dance this turn, which meant that my second Drain Punch hit and took out Excadrill, also healing me in the process. He then has a Delta Hydreigon, who's a ground poison type. So I was expecting a poison type move here and swapped out into Lantern, taking it and then countering back with a Hydro Pump while tanking an Earth Power with 28 HP because of my Assault Vest. I swap in Aegislash again, but he decides to swap as well, going into Garchomp. I knew it was going to go for Earthquake, so I swapped in Snorlax again, healed myself up with Synthesis, but got Toxiced. Knowing that it wouldn't go for Earthquake again, I went into Mismagius and then took it out with a single Frost Breath. His Aegislash came out and I decided to go Aegislash versus Aegislash. I do what I always do, Swords Dance, King Shield, Shadow Sneak, take it out, and then the final Pokemon Hydreigon also got cleaned up by Shadow Sneak. 3 Elite Four members down, 1 more to go before we can see who the actual champion is. And this Elite Four member is Kayla, and she specializes in boosting her Pokemon's attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed, with every single one of her Pokemon having a setting up move with Baton Pass. Starting off with a Smeagol who can put you to sleep 100% of the time with Spore. Amazing. Unless if you have a Grass type, and I have a Snorlax with Belly Drum, which I use to my advantage. As I try to take out the Smeargle with my Drain Punch after setting up my Belly Drum, he decides to swap out into Scizor, which doesn't get killed by Drain Punch. I then try to take it out with Wood Hammer, but he decides to swap again into Espeon, which I take out easily. She brings in Sylveon. I again try to take it out with Wood Hammer, but decides to bring in Slowbro, who also gets one shot. She brings in Sylveon again, so I go for the Wood Hammer once more, but then brings in Blaziken, and this thing survives with like 1 HP. I knew that I wouldn't be able to take a hit from this, so I swap out Chups. And bring in Darmanitan, who is able to kill Blaziken with Shadow Sneak, but I did get burned by a Fire Punch. She goes back into her Espeon, so I bring in Aegislash and try to take it out with a Swords Dance boosted Iron Head, but she brings in Smeargle before I can take it out. I then go into Venusaur because I'm expecting a Spore, and then I can easily take it out with a Sludge Bomb. And the last 2 Pokemon, Sylveon and Scizor, both go down to my Aegislashes, Iron Heads, and Shadow Sneaks. That's 4 Elite Four members defeated without losing a single Pokemon. So I walk into the champion room and see that the champion is the leader of the Perfection Cult, Rukra. He's gotten here because he finally realized that the perfect Pokemon doesn't exist. The only thing that actually exists is a perfect team that can take on anything with their combined power. So he told me that he's crafted an unbeatable team. Let's see if he's right. Let's see if we can beat the final obstacle to becoming champion of Pokemon Insurgence. He starts off pretty strong with an armored Tyranitar, so he takes less damage and kind of looks like Godzilla. Luckily, my choice bandit Darmanitan has something to say against him. Drain Punch, easily getting the one shot. Then he brings out Kyurem Black. I thought that I could easily one-shot this with Drain Punch as well, but he manages to survive and hit an Outrage, finally killing the team member that's been with us for the longest of times and is still alive. Really sad about losing Darmanitan in the final battle, but if we lose him somewhere, I'd rather lose him here. This does allow me to freely bring in Mismagius and kill it with Moonblast, but then he has a Delta Haxorus, a Water Steel type, something I can do nothing against with Mismagius. So instead I bring in Snorlax and hit it with a Drain Punch, but he's a little bit scared and swaps out after 1 hit into his Dark Mewtwo, who's now actually a Dark Psychic type. I do as much damage as I can with a Wood Hammer, but then I get hit with a Fire Blast, so I have to swap out into Lantern. I get hit with a Dark Pulse, but it doesn't do that much. Then I get hit with a Psyshock, I hang on with 16 HP and kill the Mewtwo with Dazzling Gleam. He then finally shows us his Mega Pokemon, Mega Flygon. I decide to sack Lantern so that I can get a free switch in after this. I bring in Snowy. I know this thing is still Dragon type, so I go for the Frost Breath, but it survives and kills my Mismagius as well with a Fire Blast. It's not looking too great for us. I bring in Aegislash and Shadow Sneak the Flygon to finally finish it off. But then he has a Delta Volcarona, a Poison Dark type, something that's super effective against me. I go for a King Shield first, but it doesn't really do much because it's not a physical attacker. I then get hit with a Fire Blast and get burned, which is going to cripple my attack, so my Iron Head doesn't do as much as it should have. I hit 1 more Shadow Sneak for ship damage, but then our big boy Aegislash, the one that carried us through everything, finally falls. But I still have Venusaur in the back. Volcarona misses a Fire Blast, so I'm able to hit a Sleep Powder, putting it to sleep. Then I of course put a leech seed on it and put up my amnesias. I get hit with a critical hit sludge bomb which almost takes me out, but luckily for us I'm able to survive and get some HP back by leech seed. One problem though, this Volcarona has roosts so it can heal up whenever it wakes up. So I decide to do something very risky. I swap in Snorlax hoping that it will stay asleep for a long enough time so I can take it out with Drain Punches. That's exactly what happens, and now I'm almost at full HP going into his last Pokemon, Delta Haxorus. I have one more Drain Punch remaining, and that's exactly what I use to take out Haxorus and win the battle against Rukra, losing almost my entire team. Rukra congratulates us, the professor comes in and brings me to the Hall of Fame. I register all my comrades, fallen or victorious. Doesn't matter because they were all vital in me winning this battle. This game also has a big post game, but this video is the longest that I've ever brought out. So if we can smash the like goal of 8,000 likes, I might bring out the second part and do the entire post game. But we're going to have to use some new Pokemon since all of our best ones are basically dead. Please do let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this video, because it's probably the hardest one that I've ever worked on, as I couldn't even count the attempts. I had to reset this entire game because I lost. If you want to try out Pokemon Insurgence yourself, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best fan games ever made. But that's it for now. I just want to thank my membership and Patreon supporters as always for supporting the channel. If you want to do so yourself, you can click the links in the description. It is always appreciated but not needed. And as always, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I'm Zwiggo, and I'll see you guys next time.